Sorceress is dead. We've been preparing for the arrival of another, but we never expected 4. They embody insatiable hunger, crushing darkness, searing flame, merciless wrath. If we don't stop them, they will consume everything. This is a war for our very existence. Here. Stand with us, or we will all perish.
Hello once again everyone, and welcome back. The Siege of the Atlas is upon us, and it's finally time to play some Path of Exile. Today I'll be covering one of my favorite builds, the Vaal Lightning Strike Raider. Unleash a storm of lightning projectiles and shattering Herald of Ice explosions to rapidly clear maps. Slam down Vaal lightning strikes and obliterate bosses with a true cataclysm of projectiles. With ridiculous movement speed, permanent phasing, elemental ailment immunity, and a powerful elusive, the playstyle is both fast and consistent. Defensively, the build boasts these major defensive layers, also including 100% spell suppression, significant armor and evasion rating, life leech and life gain on hit, as well as a powerful molten shell. It serves incredibly well as a league starter, with solid gear flexibility and the ability to scale far beyond what you saw in the footage. It can be comfortably accomplished in solo self-found, and while it can work in hardcore, it isn't a top contender. If you'd like to blitz through Rayclast, stick with me as I break down how to make it happen. And if you end up liking the guide, consider throwing it a like and subbing to the channel for more content just like this. Now let's get started with a rapid breakdown of the build's fundamentals. Lightning Strike is a melee strike attack skill that has 2 different components. The initial melee hit, and the wave of projectiles that fire out. We'll mainly be scaling damage in ways that affect both components. Most notably, our scaling will be critical strike focused. Deal elemental damage of all 3 types, and will automatically target additional nearby enemies. With good positioning, the extra strike can be used to double hit bosses. You should see 2 distinct bolts, one striking the ground next to the boss, and the other your extra strike, hitting the boss directly. This will improve your single target damage immensely when performed well. Vaal Lightning Strike allows you to slam down 2 Lightning Strike turrets that will automatically fire projectiles at everything nearby, helping you clear league mechanics and providing a ridiculous amount of burst damage. The build leverages the power of Elusive, Nightblade, and Withering Step. Elusive is a decaying buff that at 100% effectiveness grants 15% chance to avoid all damage from hits and 30% increased movement speed. By using Nightblade support and investing on the tree, Elusive will have a max effectiveness over 200% and will also scale an immense amount of critical strike multiplier. When we hit a critical strike, we'll gain Elusive from Nightblade. By using Withering Step as our movement key, it will often replace Nightblade's decaying Elusive with its own Elusive buff, which will itself be replaced by Nightblade's Elusive when we crit again, forming a loop that keeps our Elusive at a very high level of effectiveness consistently, granting a truly impressive amount of movement speed, chance to avoid all damage from hits, and critical strike multiplier. Just ridiculously strong. Trinity is a powerful support gem that needs to be built around. It scales off of resonance. Each element can have 50 resonance at most. When you hit with Lightning Strike, the highest type of elemental damage dealt will grant 25 resonance to the other 2 elements, meaning that if we hit hardest with lightning, cold and fire will gain 25 resonance each. Lightning damage has such a wide range that by scaling enough flat cold and fire damage, we can reliably get at least 2 different elements to hit the highest on repeated hits, ensuring that each element will have the full 50 resonance consistently, granting 30% more elemental damage and 16% resistance penetration. If your Trinity becomes inconsistent, look for a claw with more flat added cold or fire, or swap in added cold or ice bite to your main 6-link. Our only keystone is Point Blank. which causes our lightning strike projectiles to deal up to 30% more damage to nearby targets and less damage to faraway targets. Generally, this will improve both our bossing and clear speed. Against bosses, we'll be using both Ancestral Protector and Ancestral Warchief to buff our damage. We'll also be cursing enemies with either Assassin's Mark or Elemental Weakness. Before we move on, a summary of our major defensive layers. We'll be sustaining mana with one of these sources of mana leech. These are the primary auras we'll be running. Anger for the pile of flat fire damage. Determination for way more armor. Herald Device for the added cold damage and cold explosions that heavily improve our clear speed. And finally, Precision for the increased accuracy and crit chance. Running just these auras requires the Charisma Cluster and Mana Reservation Efficiency Mastery, as well as running Precision, at least initially, at a very low level. Cramming in higher investment auras like Defiance Banner and Aspect of the Cad will require a flexible combination of the options below. Our Ranger Ascendancy of Raider will look something like this. Way of the Poacher grants an additional maximum frenzy charge and ensures that our frenzy charges will be up in virtually every situation. Avatar of the Slaughter scales off of our frenzy charge investment to grant a mountain of power, movement speed, and evasion. Quartz Infusion grants permanent phasing, meaning we'll always pass through enemies, as well as providing nearly half of the spell suppression we need. Finally, Avatar of the Vaal provides half of the puzzle for full elemental ailment immunity and causes all nearby enemies to have fire, cold, and lightning exposure simultaneously, improving our damage output significantly. I enjoyed picking up my Ascendancies in this order, but if you'd prefer to get phasing, suppression, and exposure early, go Way of the Poacher, Quartz Infusion, Avatar of the Vaal, and leave Avatar of the Slaughter for last. Now let's take a look at our endgame skill trees, which will follow a progression like this. These are the masteries we'll be making use of. Each one has an important role to play, improving the power of Elusive, scaling our critical strike chance and multiplier, increasing our maximum life, allowing us to reserve more auras, and ensuring we hit our attacks. Don't be afraid to invest into 30 strength and intelligence nodes to meet attribute requirements. Allocate piercing shots early on for convenient pierce. And don't be afraid to swap around masteries if you want to try something else. We'll be using a variety of jewels across the skill tree. In many sockets, these will be flexible rare jewels, mainly featuring modifiers like life, critical strike multiplier, and attack speed, though they are incredibly flexible and can feature other modifiers if you'd like. Eventually, you'll want to pick up a Watcher's Eye, an aura-based jewel that should feature one or two of these modifiers, the best of which will be these Anger and Precision modifiers. I most heavily recommend the Critical Strike multiplier while affected by Anger. In one of these two sockets, we can make great use of a Lethal Pride, which within its area grants much needed strength to minor passives and adds random modifiers to notables, notably the chance to intimidate, deal double damage, or gain endurance charges on kill, though there are many other good options as well. The name on the jewel doesn't matter to us. Divining a single jewel will save you time, but buying and reselling jewels is the cheapest way to get a good one. Finally, that brings us to the cluster jewels. Ultimately, we have enough to do on the skill tree that these are not required. However, I do recommend running at least one large cluster, with at maximum 8 or 9 total passives, and ideally 3 notables. These can be either attack or elemental damage based, depending on what you can find for a good price. Some players may want to continue to invest into medium clusters for some extra power. These will be 4 or 5 passive, critical strike damage clusters, with 2 of the listed notables. For our bandit selection, I recommend killing all of the bandits, help out Aramir for the 2 passive points. For our Pantheons, I liked Lunaris, alongside Rislatha, Ralakesh, and Shikari, though ultimately this is completely flexible and you can run whatever you'd like, just be sure to capture all of the additional souls. Here are the keybinds that I used. Treat this as a baseline to be modified as you see fit. Most map modifiers are doable, however Elemental Reflect will kill us instantly, and it's best to avoid Cannot Leech from monsters. During general gameplay, stay on the move, whirling blades often, keep your flasks up, and engage from a distance when necessary. Use Withering Step as your movement key for a speed boost and to frequently reset Elusive, keeping it consistently at a high level to maximize its pile of crit multi, move speed, and damage avoidance. Use Flame Dash to cross gaps, and be sure to use Vaal Lightning Strike anytime it helps out. During major boss encounters, you'll want to place your Ancestral Protector and War Chief, pop your Flasks, and optionally Blood Rage if you're feeling comfortable. Drop both Vaal Lightning Strikes just before the boss becomes active, and hit them repeatedly with your regular Lightning Strike. Remember to position yourself well to make use of your extra strike. You should see 2 distinct lightning bolts. Your main hit striking the ground next to the boss so the projectiles will hit them, and the other your extra strike hitting the boss directly. Failing to do this properly will hurt your damage. Here's the progression of leveling skill trees that I recommend running. The early masteries to be on the lookout for, most notably the mana reservation efficiency so you can run more auras, life, resistances, and accuracy, as well as either life and mana leech or gain on hit. If you're not league starting, here are the leveling uniques I recommend running, and a sampling of flasks that will prove helpful. At least at league start, many players may want to level with Spectral Helix, before eventually switching over to Vaal Lightning Strike closer to maps once you can purchase one or find one. The transition will be smoothest when you've got a 5 or 6 link available, featuring Ancestral Call for extra strikes before you have Strike Gloves, as well as potentially mixing in added cold damage or Ice Bite to ensure you can balance Trinity. Our full endgame Vaal Lightning Strike 6 link will look something like this, also featuring Multi-Strike and Inspiration, though these can be swapped around for other alternatives. One of the best being a level 5 Awakened added lightning damage, though this may make balancing Trinity a bit tougher. Next, we've got our 4-link Ancestral Totems. We'll be linking Protector and War Chief to multiple Totem support, allowing us to have both Totems active at once. Culling Strike will cause both totems to automatically kill bosses if they fall below 10% life, a huge quality of life boost. You can also choose to run the more powerful and more inconsistent Vaal Ancestral War Chief for that little bit of extra burst. Our core 4-link auras were discussed earlier in the guide, but here they are once again. Eventually try to secure a well-leveled Enlighten and move Precision to a different setup. Our 4-link movement and curse setup will look something like this. First, we've got Whirling Blades, linked to life tap support, making it cost life instead of mana, so we can use it rapidly without depleting our small mana pool. New this league is the Mark on Hit support, which will automatically apply a linked mark to rare and unique enemies that we hit with any attack, and will trigger at most once every 4 seconds. By leaving Assassin's Mark at a very low level, we still get the majority of the power it provides. A level 1 Assassin's Mark linked to Mark on Hit support will cost 32 mana. This should be very manageable, but if you'd like, you could also link it to life tap support, making it cost 96 life instead. With immense life leech and life gain on hit, you probably won't even notice. Alternatively, you could run a curse enemies with elemental weakness on hit ring, or if truly dedicated, apply Assassin's Mark to bosses yourself. I recommend running this setup as shown, but if you end up with some extra room, expand the Whirling Blade setup with faster attacks, run extra utility skills, or place surplus auras here. Next, we've got our 3-link utility skills, featuring the previously discussed Withering Step, Blood Rage, and Flame Dash. Great sources of elusive, attack speed, and mobility in that order. While Blood Rage is strong, it will cause you to degen, and can be left out if you find it too dangerous or annoying. Our final setup is our 3-link Cast When Damage Taken, featuring a level 1 Cast When Damage Taken linked to a level 10 Molten Shell. By keeping Cast When Damage Taken at a low level, it will frequently trigger Molten Shell, which scales off of our armor to provide a huge buff that absorbs 75% of incoming damage before it hits our life. In the final socket, you can run surplus auras or utility skills, or expand the Molten Shell setup with increased duration. And with that, we've arrived at the endgame gear. Let's begin with the flasks. Affordable magic options can take up as many slots as you'd like, with great options like Quicksilver, Jade, Granite, and Diamond. I heavily recommend running a Granite flask to get the most out of Molten Shell. Look for suffixes that increase attack speed, armor, evasion rating, and provide corrupted blood and bleed immunity, the last of which is best on your life flask, ideally a divine life flask with instant or powerful recovery. You can also choose to mix in some of these powerful uniques. Cinder Swallow provides Onslaught, life recovery, a veiled modifier, and increases the damage that ignited enemies take. Just incredible all around. Rotgut is a solid source of movement speed and onslaught. Its Series Promise provides some chaos resistance and a bit of damage. And Bottled Faith is absurdly good if you can afford it. Be sure to fully quality your flasks, and use Instilling or Enkindling orbs as desired to modify your playstyle. Our Claw will begin as a budget rare, mainly focused on having a solid amount of flat elemental damage, ideally a decent roll of cold or fire to help balance Trinity early on. As you optimize your Claw, you'll be looking for high attacks per second, good base crit, and lots of added elemental damage. At the higher end, you'll want to keep those goals going, while also looking for attacks penetrate percentage of elemental resistances. And at the highest end of investment, same deal, but even better rolls. Our shield will begin as a cheap rare, focused only on the core modifiers. As you look to optimize, you'll be looking for several of these green modifiers, mainly spell suppression, chance to avoid elemental ailments, block chance and attack speed. And eventually, if you end up running Feral's Fur on any piece of rare gear with an open suffix, you can craft level 20 Aspect of the Cat. I'm making mention of this here, but I won't be including it on every piece of rare gear. Just remember that it can go anywhere. At the highest end of investment, you have two options: a synthesized shield with a +1 maximum frenzy implicit, or the uber expensive Squire. Our body armor will begin as a cheap rare, corrupted 6th link, or tabula rasa. As you look to optimize, look for a better influenced rare featuring 1 or 2 of the listed modifiers, or a regular rare that you can add eldritch implicits to, or even one of these unique options. At the higher end of investment, Feral's Fur is still one of the best picks available, granting tons of armor, evasion, life, consistent frenzy and power charges, and free aspect of the cat. Though again, you must craft the aspect of the cat suffix on another piece of rare gear. And again, alternatively, you can run a really good influenced rare or fantastic regular rare with optimized eldritch implicits. At the highest end of investment, look for a corrupted or double corrupted Feral's Fur, or an absolutely amazing rare. Our helmet will begin as a cheap rare or a great unique like Starkanja's head. As you progress, look for a more optimized rare, which should eventually, down the line, be an expensive Blizzard Crown, which provides a massive amount of flat cold damage. However, with the new Eldritch implicits, other base types will be much more competitive, and may even be better. Alternatively, if you're a madman, you could run the Replica Abyssus, which is ungodly powerful, but will often be the death of you. At the highest end of investment, you'll either have an influenced Blizzard Crown or a different type of regular rare with 2 incredible Eldritch implicits. Either one should ideally be enchanted with one of these, with the Lightning Strike Pierces and Projectiles being the best options available. Our gloves will begin as cheap rares, Oscarm Nubux for easy Assassin's Mark, or Hrimsorrow for help balancing Trinity early. The next step will be getting Hunter-influenced gloves, featuring strike skills target 1 additional nearby enemy. This modifier is crucial as it allows us to drop Ancestral Call for a better support gem. Even if the gloves are absolutely awful, it will still be worth it as an early upgrade. At the higher end, you'll be looking for strike gloves that also feature some of these modifiers. And at the highest end, the same deal, just more of everything we want. Our boots will begin as a cheap rare, or a pair of the fantastic Darkrai Vectors, which can be used all the way through the endgame. Eventually you'll want to upgrade to a more optimized rare, or an enchanted pair of Darkrai Vectors. At the highest end of investment, you'll either have influenced boots that feature things like Tailwind and Onslaught, or incredibly solid regular boots with phenomenal Eldritch implicits. Regardless of your pick, you'll want to enchant your boots. The best option is damage penetrates 10% of elemental resistances if you haven't killed recently, which is absolutely fantastic against many of the game's hardest bosses. Alternatively, the added lightning damage and attack speed are also worth consideration. Our amulet will begin as a flexible rare. As you progress, look for several of the green modifiers, such as critical strike multiplier and elemental damage with attack skills. At the higher end of investment, you'll either want a very optimized influenced rare, or a unique like Ull's Uprising, which will allow you to reserve a powerful 50% aura like Wrath for free. And at the very highest end of investment, you'll want either the uber expensive Stranglegasp or Ulnatol's Vow. Regardless of what you're running, once you've got a decent amulet, you'll want to be sure to anoint it. Panopticon amplifies your totem buffs and provides the most raw DPS, but of course only when your totems are active. Alternatively, you can get great use out of Mark the Prey if you're running Assassin's Mark, and Claws of the Falcon will always be a solid pick. Worth a mention is Tribal Fury, as it grants your strikes an additional target. However, it is not a cheap anointment. That currency would be better spent just getting cheap strike gloves. It should only be anointed if you're desperate for that extra strike. Be sure to use appropriate catalysts on your amulet, rings, and belt to get the most out of them. Our rings will begin as flexible rares. A shout out to Tessalio's Sign, a fantastic early ring that will make balancing Trinity far easier. As you look to optimize, mix in several of these green modifiers, such as elemental damage with attack skills, attack speed, and flat added elemental damage to attacks. If you choose not to run Assassin's Mark, look for a ring with curse enemies with elemental weakness on hit. At the very highest end of investment, you'll have extremely optimized influenced rares, or powerful uniques like the Taming, which grants a ridiculous amount of increased elemental damage, Circle of Fear, a great Herald of Ice focused ring that will make balancing Trinity easy, and the classic Mark of the Elder, which is phenomenal, but must be paired with a Shaper ring that isn't as good anymore since we can't get Assassin's Mark on it. Both ring slots are incredibly flexible. As long as you've got the attributes and resistances you need, feel free to run any combination you like. Finally, that brings us to the belt, which will begin as a flexible rare or a great unique like the Belt of the Deceiver. As you progress, eventually upgrade to a Stygian Vise, enabling the use of an Abyssal Jewel featuring some of the modifiers below, most notably large rolls of flat elemental damage to attacks or claw attacks. Alternatively, if you can get 2 really good jewels, a Darkness Enthroned can be an affordable and powerful option. At the higher end of investment will be an influenced Stygian Vise that also features a few of the green modifiers. And at the very highest end of investment, you've of course got the godly expensive Mage Blood and Headhunter. And I think that covers just about everything. I really hope you enjoyed the guide. Consider all the usual stuff, liking, subbing, and Patreon. You know the deal. A massive thank you to all of my patrons. Your support truly makes these guides possible. Special recognition goes to Adam Banamias, A Up, Agent Leo, Andrew Miller, Bloody, Chris IRL, Christopher Cravey, Damian Jagnandan, Dan Wayne, Evan Jones, Gareth Thomas, Greg Wells, Hunter Wild, I Am a Churro AMA, John Gabriel, Luke C. Nasivera, Lukash Galik, Makamil, Matthias Funkevist, Michael Johnson, Mocha Madness, Bottomus Prime, Nate, Nick Sohard, Piotr, Rasmus Blackpausko, Ravager Nick, Ray Hill, Sabaton Babylon, Spencer Ripe, Tony G773, Varos Vitele, Xi, and finally, Zvin. Thank you so much everyone, and as always, I've been Esero, and I will see you guys in the next one.